Hi, everyone. Welcome to Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance, Food Choices in Climate Change, Diets That Make a Difference with Dr. Jolene Bowers. And just so you know in advance, we are keeping everybody muted, and we had some kind of hackers on our Monday presentation. So if you're trying to unmute yourself and then you keep getting muted, it's because we're going to keep everybody muted until the very end. If you have questions, you can open your chat box on your bottom toolbar and just it should be able to comment your question to Ask Me at NASCA. That's Jenna. And throughout the program, Jolene will field questions. She likes to kind of keep it conversational. So that's pretty exciting. And for those of you that are new to NASCA, I'm the community organizer in the West region, Prescott and Cottonwood areas. Jenna Ortega, who has asked me at NASCA on the video, is our East Region community organizer. And since the pandemic and COVID, we have partnered on doing multiple virtual events. And we are still staying true to our vision and mission of educating and empowering people to take action on the negative impacts of climate change at a local level, state, and national. So that's our goal. And I'm gonna go ahead and do the introduction for Jolene. Apologize that I have to read it. I don't have it memorized. But I love Jolene. Gosh, she did a presentation for us over at Orem School, and that was amazing. They cooked for us all vegan foods, and she's truly inspirational to me. When I asked her, is there any vegan chocolate? Because I was having a meltdown, and she helped me. I was texting her like a crazy person. But so Dr. Jolene Bowers is a public health scientist with a PhD in molecular biology, specializing in the impact we have on our environment and influences on our environment, and influences our environment has on us, as we are all in a one health ecosystem. In her research, she has discovered that switching to a whole food, plant-based diet is a powerful way to help curb most, if not all, of our major public health threats, including our current climate crisis. I couldn't agree more. So without further ado, I'm gonna let Jolene is gonna share her PowerPoint and her presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that intro, Carrie, and thanks, Jenna. Thanks to NASCA and the other sponsors today, too, to allow me to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've learned over the past couple of years. Like Carrie said, I do research in public health, although my focus is on microbes, mostly in the form of pathogens, and some microbiome work as well. You'd actually be surprised how much microbes play a critical role in this whole One Health ecosystem that we're in. So I'm gonna try sharing my screen, talking and doing something at the same time. But yeah, so because I work in public health with on infectious diseases and pathogens, I gotta warn you guys, I've been in COVIDville since February. So where I work, we kind of dropped everything to respond to this pandemic because we're perfectly suited to. And so yeah, I'm just reconnecting, I guess, with all of this information and material. So might be a little bit choppy because it's been a while for me, but also, you know, the other thing that I noticed, you know, kind of reconnecting with this subject matter is that it's been a little bit startling to kind of, you know, take an assessment and realize where we are. It's a little bit, it's very scary. It's very sobering. So yeah, but today I'm gonna talk about two topics, not just, one that nobody wants to talk about, that's climate change, right? But of course, the other one is about diet change, and that's, another topic that not a lot of people want to hear about. So I really thank everybody for coming out, and hopefully you can hear what the message that I'm delivering with an open mind, and an open heart. So, okay, I'm gonna assume you guys can all see my screen, and I will launch in. So, yeah, Carrie mentioned this One Health concept. So, what this is, it's actually something you guys probably all know about. Everybody knows about this, but we're just kind of starting to appreciate its power and put a name to it. And that's this One Health. And all this is really describing how everything on Earth is interconnected, and not just interconnected, but we are this ecosystem where all the parts and pieces are inextricably linked. And we really can't, do some activity that benefits any one part of the ecosystem where it doesn't have a cost on some other part of the ecosystem. And a lot of times this One Health concept is presented as this triad, where it's all about people, animals, and the environment, and how those are interconnected. But I actually kind of like this image better that I found recently, because, well, not only does it include microbes as part of the foundation of the system, but it also shows how nature is really our foundation, and we're relying so much on nature for all of our resources that serve as this the base for our ecosystem. And this One Health thing is not anything local or new or trendy here. It's actually something that's gone global. So there is this One Health concept in the international health regulations. So this is where these countries from around the world are required to report these major events that might pose a threat to other countries. So, for example, a nuclear power plant meltdown, or perhaps maybe a new novel coronavirus that could pose a public health threat. And this is largely driven by the World Health Organization, the United Nations, as well as other organizations. So yeah, this One Health thing is out there. We also have One Health programs in our federal government, and we should, right? So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have a One Health program, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture do too. And really the focus here, the goal here is to really see things through this One Health lens. So to take a step back and have a larger perspective on all of the things that these organizations are working on. And so, yeah, like I said, nature underpins all life. And it also funds all of our economic activity. And one estimate by this Living Planet Index puts the worth at $125 trillion. And I think I have the right number of zeros there. I was just putting that out more for myself. But yeah, it's pretty staggering how much we use nature to our benefit. So, okay, so yeah, that was my intro. So what I was planning to talk about today is, of course, unfortunately, how our One Health is in jeopardy. And this, we're all focused on climate change, but because all of this One Health is so connected, there are all these other public health threats that are connected to that too. So I'm gonna go over a lot of those. and then talk about this one most destructive force that is actually a human activity. That is one of the major sources of our public health problems. And yeah, it's actually just one sector of that human activity. And then I'm going to talk about, of course, what actions we can take. And I think it's a little bit of a giveaway with my title. But I don't want to downplay these other very important changes that, as a society, as a species, that we really do need to make in order to survive and even thrive as a species. But I'm going to just focus on this one that I'm talking about today. And one of the simplest things that you can do right now. And then I'm going to kind of wrap it up with, why this isn't all over the place. Why am I the one telling you guys this when really it should be something that everybody knows? Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think everybody here knows we're in this existential crisis right now. And yeah, so I call this one health, one crisis, that concept. And we're all in this together, and all of these problems are affecting all of us, including the animals and the other organisms on the planet. But these are the major threats that we have going on right now, and it's probably not comprehensive. These are just some of the really big ones that we're facing right now. And so the interesting thing is that all of these crises are related. So not just the interconnection of all of living beings on Earth are connected, but of course these crises that are affecting us are leading to this basically this ecosystem breakdown. And I'm sure you guys all know this. Of course, we are not on track to address this climate change problem. And this one was updated just last month, and it has not changed much, except that this has gone up a little bit. It was actually at 1 degree just a few months ago, the last time I presented on this. And one interesting thing is that, they have this a hint of green here. So these actual projections the temperatures have gone down a tiny bit. And that's because of this pandemic that we're in has really slowed the economy, which has also slowed these greenhouse gas emissions. And so they say that's like just a hint of green, but this does not take into account the impact that will probably come from recovery or stimulus measures that we take. And you guys all know the consequences of our climate change. I mean, the list is very long and very threatening. But one of the studies that I came across that's just from January of this year, I think they say it very well. We have generally conducted business as usual in the face of these crises and really have largely failed to address this predicament we're in. Okay, well, so you guys all know about greenhouse gas emissions. I wanted to just show this one slide to remind people, or maybe to inform people that even though we always hear about carbon dioxide, I think anyway, there are a few other greenhouse gases that are just as, if not even more important than carbon dioxide. So that's methane, nitrous oxide, these fluorinated gases. And one thing to understand is that these different greenhouse gases have very different effects on climate. And that's captured with this global warming potential, this measure that is assigned to each of these greenhouse gases to describe, what is its overall impact. And it takes into account the ability of that greenhouse gas to absorb energy, as well as how long that gas stays in the atmosphere. And so because of that, this GWP can be expressed in different ways. So over 100 years, what's this greenhouse gases GWP, or over 20 years? And this carbon dioxide, that one is the one that serves as the reference. So it will always have this GWP of 1, and all the other greenhouse gases will be compared to that. And I'll touch on this a little bit later when we talk about each of these greenhouse gases individually. So just like we have a One Health, we have a One Water. So we're all sharing a very finite resource. And I just love this image from the USGS that really puts things into perspective. So if we were to empty all the oceans and put them into one sphere, that's what it would look like. This dot here is all of the liquid fresh water. And then this teeny tiny dot that you can barely see, that's all of the fresh water in our lakes and rivers. And so this is not counting these aquifers that unfortunately we are draining at an alarming rate. And so yes, we're facing freshwater shortages, and we are very likely to encounter these water wars. I think, you know, this is actually from a couple of years ago. So I wonder if the chances of us seeing these water wars have actually gone up. But this increasing climate change and the population growth is actually, you know, going to probably trigger this intense competition for this increasingly scarce resource. And this is probably going to lead to regional instability. So basically, to deal with this, we all need to start getting along. And yeah, I'm not sure that we're really close to that yet. And one of the Band-Aid approaches, I guess, to dealing with these freshwater shortages is turning to reclaimed water. But of course, there's concerns with that. So for those of you that don't know, reclaimed or recycled water is it's wastewater that has gone through quite a bit of treatment to clean it, but not all of the treatments that water goes through to make it potable. So once it gets to this point, if water is going to be used for drinking, then it gets additional treatment. But then it gets pumped out at this point to go to this new system for reclaimed water. And this is where it's reclaimed. And at least in Northern Arizona, we treat reclaimed water with chlorine before it goes into this distribution system. And then this is used, of course, for sports fields and recreational areas like golf courses, municipal toilets, that kind of thing. But keep in mind, this is a fairly new system, and you know, there's we don't know a lot about what can be getting through with this kind of the shortcut in treatments. And then of course the water that we do have is I don't have much to say here except that, you know, that wow, more than half of our US rivers are unsuitable for wildlife. And this is according to our EPA. Yeah. All right, deforestation is another big one. And I know it seems crazy that all of these pieces are related to one another, but yeah, so deforestation and desertification are two other of these big One Health crises. And deforestation is kind of this triple whammy, right? Whereas these forests were these greenhouse gas sinks, now we chop them down. Not only are we getting rid of that greenhouse gas sink, we're also releasing all of the carbon that was in those forests. And of course, these are critical habitat for a lot of the global biodiversity. And this is what retains our topsoil as well. And soil is an incredibly underappreciated resource, in my opinion. And I just love this quote from this science study that came out, that, you know, they have found that these great civilizations have actually fallen because they did not take care of their soils. Oh yeah, and then of course, you know, this because we're losing this critical habitat, we have lost an insane amount of biodiversity, and this is pretty heart-wrenching, especially for somebody like me. You know, the whole reason I went into biology is because of this just amazement that nature continuously provides. Every time I learn something new, it's incredible, that, you know, these things that nature, these systems that are out there is just something that no one could ever imagine. And of course, these things, they play incredibly important roles in our ecosystem. And so their loss also further destabilizes our ecosystem. Then, of course, we've got human and animal diseases, these non-communicable diseases. These are top killers that these are actually all preventable, largely preventable. And then there's also zoonotic diseases. And these are diseases that are shared between animals and people. So for example, COVID-19 likely originated from some animal that in some wildlife trade. And that is a good example of a disease that's come from animals, a zoonotic disease. And there's different types of zoonotic diseases. Some of them, like COVID-19, will make the jump from animal to human just one time. And then we are dense enough of a population that we then spread it to one another and it becomes human disease, kind of like HIV in the past. But then there's these other diseases that we continuously get from animals, like Lyme disease, and then ones that we can get from animals, pass around in humans, and then get back to animals. So yeah. Anyway, these are incredibly important, and that's because most of our new diseases, our emerging diseases, are zoonotic. And yeah, more than half of our pathogens are zoonotic. But those aren't the only pathogens out there. So we also have these ones that cause these food outbreaks, which are on the rise and cost an insane amount of money every year, as well as these environmental outbreaks. Yeah. And it's getting harder to treat these infections too. And it's said that we're entering this post-antibiotic era where drug-resistant infections or just infectious diseases will become a leading killer again. So we'll go back to the time before we even had antibiotics for treatment. And unfortunately, it's not going to become a leading killer because these other killers like cancer and heart disease and diabetes rates are going to go down. No, it's because it's largely because of antibiotic resistance. So yeah, okay, yeah, we know all of this, and we know that all of these crises are related, in that they're all crises that we're facing today. But you know, how else are these problems related? Well, their major cause is all the same. And no, I'm not talking about humans being stupid, although that is one big school of thought out there. The single biggest destructive force on the earth is our agriculture, aka our food system. And this is the cause of so many of those major health threats that I just talked about. And then, you know, we have to eat though, and we also need to increase our food production to handle the population growth that we are sure to see. So yeah, here's, you know, agriculture is the problem. What do we do? Well, there's a lot of things that we can do. a lot of things that we need to do as a society and as a system. However, that's like revolutionizing our food system. That's one. And changing our farming practices. Those aren't ones that I'm going to cover today because, that's not something you can start right now and do. So I'm going to start with talking about these ones that you can do. And of course, I'm going to focus on this top one here. So is there something that, can we just shift our eating patterns so that we are consuming products that don't produce as much greenhouse gases, that maybe are more efficient than others, so we use fewer resources than others? And are there products that pollute more than others that we can stay away from? And it turns out, yes, that's what I'm going to talk about. And I am, these two other things are things that you can start doing today as well. I'm going to circle back and talk a little bit about those at the end. But yeah. So what part of our food system should we be avoiding? What can we do? Like I said, we have to eat. So what should we do? Well, the biggest culprit by far is our animal agriculture. And yeah, this has been called our world's most urgent problem. And there's lots of reasons for that. And I've actually been shocked at the number of studies that have come out just in the past few years covering this exact topic. And I guess, it's not shocking that this word needs to get out and these scientists are doing this. It's that there's no money in this conclusion. So not only is there not a lot of funding to do these studies in the first place, some scientists are actually putting their career on the line to get this message out there, because it really is something that people don't want to hear. So yeah, there's a few things to keep in mind about why the animal products are the culprit by far. And yeah, so one of them is that they're ridiculously inefficient as a food source. The vast majority of our plant agriculture actually goes to feed animals. And here, this group, the Climate Healers, they have a wonderful website. They've actually put together this little figure about, here's our food up here, right? It's this grazing land and these crops. Vast majority of that is going to our livestock, whereas a few of these crops are going into industrial processing, and then some of them we eat as whole foods. Unfortunately, not enough, right? And so, yeah, this is showing that animals eat like 4.5 times the amount that all humans on Earth eat. Yeah, so, but we then eat those animals, right? So it all evens out. Actually, no, that's not the case. And one of the first things that you learn in biology class is about these trophic levels. So many of you probably recall learning about trophic levels. This is where the energy stored as this biomass. Very little of that energy is actually transferred to the next trophic level. So these organisms that will feed on that base of biomass. And only about 10% of the energy from this level going to this level will actually result in the growth of an organism or biomass at that next trophic level. And so on and so forth as you go up the scale. So much of the energy that came from that initial source, nature and plants, is lost to metabolism to keep the organism alive, to waste, and then of course to heat. And so we need 10 to 25 times more calories to put into livestock, to put into animals, than the feed, in feed, than we get out of those animal products. So it's not just the most inefficient of our food that we're eating, but it's ridiculously inefficient by any measure. And really, it's completely unnecessary. So another piece that I'm finding that a lot of people don't appreciate is the sheer scale of animal agriculture. Yeah, I think this picture from this study really says a lot. Okay, the majority of mammals on Earth are livestock. That's crazy. These are billions of animals that we've bred to put on Earth. And this is how humans are changing the world. Same with poultry. And, another reason that these are inefficient is, we just grew up this whole animal. Well, we only eat part of what we just grew. In best case scenario, you get a third of the cow left over for food after processing it. And funny enough, Winston Churchill actually wasn't the first, but he's one of the most famous ones to point out the absurdity of this a long time ago. And he thought within 50 years that we would be growing all this meat without the animal attached to it, which is an interesting concept. And I also want to not forget that fish and seafood are part of that as well. So we're not just talking about land, but fish and seafood as food is incredibly inefficient as well because of the bycatch and the destructive nature of the way that we harvest these things. So yeah, the science is really crystal clear. There is one major cause for so many of our One Health problems, or our public health problems, whether they're direct or indirect. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's the case, how that's happening. So remember, I talked about these different greenhouse gases and what's actually contributing to the emissions, the climate change. So let's go back, sorry. So if we look at just carbon dioxide and the way that's broken down, it's like, okay, yeah, and there's probably nothing surprising there. We know transportation, electricity, and industry are huge parts of emitters of carbon dioxide. But let's take a look at methane. So methane, that global warming potential over 100 years is actually 30 times that of carbon dioxide. That means it's 30 times more powerful of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide when looked over at over 100 years. If we shorten that time span and just look at over 20 years, it more than doubles. Over 10 years. It's over 100 times that of carbon dioxide. And this website that I mentioned earlier, the leaders of that argue that we actually should be using this 10-year global warming potential measure, because that's about how much time we have left to address this incredible problem. And so, okay, so methane, yeah, let's take a look. Yeah, there's a couple of things on here that scream animal agriculture. One of them is enteric fermentation, which I'll talk about in a minute, but basically is, yes, it's fermentation that's taking place in the stomachs of livestock. And then also manure management over here. These are big, big parts of our methane problem. Also, nitrous oxide is a big one. I mean, well, yeah, I don't even need to point out what the biggest emitter of nitrous oxide is. And that's almost 300 times carbon dioxide's global warming potential over 100 years. And then lastly, is these fluorinated gases. And there are several types of these. The one that I'm gonna highlight here is these hydrofluorocarbons. Look at this global warming potential. It's in the thousands of times over carbon dioxide. And this will become important later on because it's a refrigerant. So yeah, there's lots of numbers out there too about how animal agriculture really is contributing to our greenhouse gas problem. And yeah, so I mean, the ones that I like to highlight are ones that aren't just taking into account this direct attribution, so that enteric fermentation and maybe the manure management of animal agriculture, but this World Watch is a pretty famous calculation where they actually took into account these activities that are attached to animal agriculture, that like the burning of forests for grazing land. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then Dr. Sailesh Rao, the one from the Climate Healers organization, he argues that actually 87% of all greenhouse gases are from animal agriculture. Makes a very compelling argument in a paper that they published. And what he's doing is further accounting for that 10-year GWP that we should be using. So yeah, enteric fermentation. This is what you think it is. It is a cow burping, mostly. And this is what creates methane. And then, of course, their manure decomposition is a huge source of that nitrous oxide and methane. And, you know, this might not seem like such a big deal, but remember the sheer scale of animal agriculture. These livestock number in the billions across the globe. So it's a pretty powerful force. And yeah, these animals aren't just grazing on pasture land. This is more like what animal agriculture looks like, right? And we actually have to transport the feed to get to these animals. And then we have to transport animals to the slaughterhouse. And it's funny, you know, I see these trucks all the time, and it's been funny to me that I swear other people just don't, they're invisible to other people. And yeah, it's interesting. If you just start looking for them, you'll see them everywhere. Here's another underappreciated source of greenhouse gases. So yeah, remember that all life forms have carbon. They're all made of carbon. So with death is the release of a lot of carbon, keeping in mind that sheer scale of animal agriculture. This slaughterhouse effluent is an important piece. And then, yeah, here's that refrigeration too. So the minute that you chop up an animal for parts, you have to refrigerate it, otherwise it spoils. And so this is a big source of greenhouse gas emissions attached to animal agriculture. And then not just greenhouse gases, but also biodiversity and desertification are big factors affected by animal agriculture, because the vast majority of our deforestation is for animal feed or to clear land to graze animals. And yes, we are burning down the Amazon for our meat and dairy. Yeah, and that triple whammy of our forests and other wild lands as well is, yeah, the one thing I want to point out is, you know, it's not just the forests that we're talking about. Like, we all think of the Amazon immediately, right? But it's these grasslands too. These are also critical habitat for important flora and fauna. And you know, you think we would have learned our lesson, but a really good example is the Dust Bowl of the 1930s in the U.S. Midwest. And albeit that was wheat, but it really showed how much destruction we can do in an area just by tilling up the soil and allowing it to blow away or wash away. And of course, animal agriculture uses most of the usable land. This is a great graphic showing just how much of our land goes to animal agriculture. So out of the 30% of Earth's surface that is land, yeah, you can just kind of go down the chart and realize that, yeah, out of our agricultural land, 77% is for livestock, so meat and dairy mostly, while that food source only produces 18% of our global calorie supply, whereas most of it comes from the minority of the food we produce, which is the plant-based foods. And even when you normalize it to just talk about protein, most of our protein globally is coming from plant-based foods. That's how inefficient this animal agriculture practice is. And of course, it's the big reason why we are losing so much of our biodiversity is because of this land use. Okay, so quick check-in with everybody. There's a couple more crises that I'm going to cover, but here's how our foods measure up when we're talking about just greenhouse gases. So at the very top, of course, is beef and lamb. And so for those of you that don't know, these are the ruminant livestock. So they have that stomach that is made for doing this enteric fermentation. And so, yeah, they're the biggest, by far the biggest greenhouse gas emitters. Other things that are a little surprising that are on the list are not just all of these animal products, but yeah, chocolate. Make sure you're checking where your chocolate comes from. And then, one thing that I definitely want to point out is that one portion of the highest impact vegetable proteins, when we're talking about just proteins, that is, it emits less than the lowest impact animal protein. So the difference is vast. You really can't go wrong by just cutting out some of these animal products. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, there's my first question for the group. Jenna, is that you or Carrie?
Yep, I'm going to do, you want me to post the poll?
Yep, sure, thank you. Yeah, so here's a fun question for you guys. Test a little bit of your knowledge on this topic.
Okay, hold on one second. On brand, I've lost control of the poll. So let me see. Jenna, are you able to do the poll now? Because it's saying that.
I got it now, yes.
Cool. So Jenna's going to share the poll question, and if you are a co-host on here, you can't see the question, but Jenna will be able to calculate your responses.
So actually it is showing in the other meeting that multiple people are stuck in the waiting room, I think. I don't believe you guys can see it because they all voted in the waiting room, or can you guys see it? I'm so confused. We're having some technical difficulties again.
I see it.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps, but yeah, it's front and center.
All right, I will end it.
Does everybody see it? Do you know? Should I give the answer?
I think so, yes. Sorry, guys.
Okay, yeah, sorry, guys. This is my first time with this polling thing with Zoom. I think it's really cool. So yeah, I think everybody got it. Crazy as it sounds, all three. It's insane the lengths that the industries are going to really kind of tackle this greenhouse gas issue because it's major, right? And they know it. So yeah, one of the studies is feeding them lemongrass and a form of cow beano, which You know, for people, that's actually a fungus in that amino pill that tamps down the methanogenesis in the stomach. So they're doing something similar in cows. And then vaccines. I was shocked to learn this one, but then I thought about it. I'm like, I guess I shouldn't be so shocked, because that enteric fermentation is due to microbes in the cows and the sheep's stomachs. So yeah, interesting. But, you know, I've seen studies where even though these results will be somewhat inflated when they present the positive and beneficial effects of doing this, really, when you look at it comprehensively, the studies are showing that really, if we do all of these things, it's not going to make very much difference, like maybe 10%. Yeah. Okay. Oh, do I need to shut the poll? Okay. Do you guys see my slides okay? Hopefully.
Yes.
I do, but I never see the poll.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, moving on. So yeah, water. How is animal agriculture, you know, causing some of our water shortages and water crises? Well, again, a third of our freshwater use globally is for livestock, and just in the United States, more than half of our freshwater goes to water crops that are then fed to animals, whereas 5%, only 5% is for domestic use. So it kind of makes you think twice about, you know, hey, shut off the water while you're brushing your teeth. Yeah, that's not that big of a deal. Okay, so next poll question.
You got that, Jenna?
Awesome. Okay, so the question is, yeah, if I were really hankering for a steak, but I want to be responsible and make up for that water footprint, how many showers do I need to skip to equal the water that was used in the production of that steak? Awesome. Yeah, I think most people are getting it. Do I end, Jenna, you end the poll, right? Yeah. So yeah, of course, it's the biggest number on there. Isn't that insane? One steak, 116-ounce steak, and it's 100 showers. And I just love this website. I encourage you guys all to go visit it. skipshowersforbeef.com. It's a really funny but very serious website where they break it down for you. How many showers would you have to skip if you wanted to have a steak or a burger or a sloppy joe? And they've also got these other, you know, instructions of things that you can do, taking a dirt bath, a sandpaper scrub, so that you're not so offensive when you're not taking showers. Put another way, I'll do like this way to say it too, that I could actually just turn my shower on and leave it running forever. And I would still not use as much water as someone that is eating a typical Western omnivorous diet. It's pretty shocking when you think about it that way. And I know you guys saw this slide already. One final point I want to make is that, yeah, vegetables and starchy roots are orders of magnitude less water intensive than animal agriculture. Then pollution. I mean, the picture's worth 1,000 words here, right? You know, there's about 10 times as many livestock animals on Earth as there is people each year, the number of animals that are killed. And, you know, I like to point out that at least in developed countries, people have a sewage system. Livestock don't. So yeah, this is a huge source of pollution. And even the EPA agrees that this, the most of the water pollution that we're facing is from this nutrient pollution, meaning manure and fertilizers that are spread all over our crops, that most of which are then fed to animals, right? So yeah, another quick one, now that we've covered land, water, and fertilizers, here's kind of a comparison of some different sources of protein. So kidney beans and almonds, these plant-based proteins compared to some animals, and this is all normalized so that they're all providing the same amount of protein. If we look at these numbers about land use, water use, fertilizers, you can just see the numbers jump up as we move over to the animal-based sources. This one study calculated that if we just skipped or just substituted beans for beef in the United States only, we could significantly reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, spare us area of land 1.5 times the size of California. If beans aren't your thing, check out these different plant-based meats that are out there now. The Beyond Burger is claiming 99% less water. So I wouldn't have to skip any showers to be able to enjoy a Beyond Burger and negate my water footprint. And don't forget, we're not just talking about meats, but also dairy as well as eggs. So yeah, here's a breakdown of dairy milk and how it ranks against some of these plant-based milks. And I don't know if you guys remember a couple of years ago, this big to-do about almond milk being so water intensive. And you know, to some extent that is definitely true. But if you look, this is based on a very sound scientific study. It's still only about half of the water that's used for dairy and doesn't use nearly the land or the greenhouse gases.
Jolene, we have a question. She'd like you to address the topic of grass-fed beef versus conventional.
Yeah, that is a really good question. Well, so when it comes to the enteric fermentation, the foods that the cows eat does make a difference. However, it's still happening. That enteric fermentation is still happening. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely, it's a different calculation, right, when you're talking about land use and water use. But keep in mind that even with this grass-fed beef, that the amount of land, the amount of resources that would have to go into it in order to, I guess, to keep at the same level of our consumption is pretty ridiculous and still very unsustainable. As for hard numbers there, I don't have hard numbers in front of me, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so and when it comes to the zoonotic diseases, this is where, you know, we have all the ingredients for a whole recipe book of zoonoses. These zoonoses happen all of the time. And we hear so much about COVID-19 right now, because that is one that just happened to go pandemic. But these jumps from these animals that are kept in cages or exploited are constantly passing us new viruses and diseases. Most of the time, it will just stay at a local scale and have a local impact. But yeah, so it's really we're creating these new opportunities, right, for this pathogen spillover, so this transfer from one host to another. So yeah, livestock mixed with wild animals, mixed with habitat loss, and then us coming into close contact with them. We are just setting the stage for pandemics. And this certainly won't be the last pandemic that we see. Yeah, and these are just a few of the examples that are out there. Okay, yeah, next polling question.
You got that, Jenna?
Yes, working on it on the other computer. Sorry that we have to go this way. So should be up now.
Okay, so you guys remember the Spanish flu. Well, you hopefully don't remember it, but if you know your history, you know the Spanish flu was a type of influenza that wiped out a significant portion of our human population globally. So yeah, where was the first known case of Spanish flu? Dang, you guys are too good at this. Awesome. Yeah, so I was actually shocked to learn this one. Actually, the answer is Kansas. And my point here is that, you know, this isn't just something that comes out of China. These zoonotic diseases are very often coming from livestock. And you probably do remember just recently the swine flu of 2009 that definitely originated in somewhere in the Western Hemisphere. And we don't know, and we'll probably never know, but probably it was maybe either Mexico or someplace in the United States. So yeah, we're definitely not immune. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and here is where I'm gonna try to share a YouTube video. It's a 2-minute video of just, it's actually from that movie Contagion, which a lot of scientists agree is a very realistic movie. And if you watch it now, it's an older movie, but if you watch it now, it's very eerie how on point it is in this COVID-19 pandemic that we're in. Okay.
So I really enjoy Jolene's bravery on sharing the video. So just let me know if you have any problems. I so far can't see anything, but I did see the movie. I braved it out, and I highly recommend it. And I can't believe this was like 10 or 12 years ago, because
Yep.
it's literally today. So I'll let you show it.
Yeah, so pretty eerie about how spot on that is, that it really is how different zoonotic diseases can get out there. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, all right. And so many of you probably know this too, that, you know, we're probably entering this post-antibiotic era because the vast majority of our antibiotics are actually used in animals, in livestock. So in the United States, it's like 80% of our antibiotics go to animals. And this is used as a prophylactic because these animals are in such close quarters and close proximity that, you know, it's just a perfect breeding ground for disease. And they're also growth promoters, oddly enough. They can actually help these animals grow faster. And one thing these images that I see everywhere out there about how this antibiotic resistance is, you know, introduced into our system, into these, you know, our waterways, and it's always this really nice picturesque representation of our farming and agriculture and our society and systems, when that is so unrealistic. I can't get over how many times I see a figure like this in scientific presentations. It angers me because it is not reality. This is reality. And then, yeah, you know, these animals are consuming these antibiotics or antibiotic-ridden feed, and then, you know, they're chock full of bacteria that are in their guts and comes out in their manure, which we are spreading everywhere. Yeah. And yeah, sometimes that these organisms from these CAFOs or these animal operations can actually make it to the store on meat. And I highlight this paper because it's actually a couple of friends of mine that did this study. And a lot of it was done here in Flagstaff, where they bought chicken from the store, and they also collected all of the E. coli that had caused these urinary tract infections from our local hospital, and did some whole genome sequencing, and were able to show that the E. coli, that this really virulent strain of E. coli was coming from the meat. Yeah. Which is, yeah, really kind of a scary concept. And there's all sorts of those studies out there now that, yeah, and it's not surprising, right? It's when these animals are going to the slaughterhouses, some of their feces is getting onto the meat. Then, yeah, food outbreaks, where do you think these ones come from? So E. coli, salmonella, these ones are all enteric organisms, meaning that they normally live in the intestines of animals or people. And so, yeah, the way that they're getting out there onto our food is through the manure that we're using as fertilizer. So unfortunately, the people that eat just veggies are not immune to this because, yeah, it's the fertilizer. Then, of course, environmental outbreaks are many times from the same exact sources. And I was part of an investigation last year where we looked at this E. coli 0157H7. This is a really nasty form of E. coli that can actually kill you. And it did. It killed a couple of kids down in the valley. And no one could really figure out where it came from. And we looked at the drinking water in the school. We looked at the reclaimed water used to water the yard at the school. The kids had just visited a petting zoo, so we went and we swabbed some of the animals at the petting zoo to find out the source here. But yeah, and the CDC came in, and there was a bunch of public health investigators in there. No one thought to look just down the road. There's a big dairy farm. And like, okay, you know, that's probably a good place to start looking, because again, that E. coli, it comes from living organisms or living mammals' guts. So. And again, not to leave our marine friends off of the list too, we have the same exact problems when it comes to fish farming, this aquaculture. So there's habitat destruction, pollution, and of course, you know, what are we feeding those farmed fish? Is we actually go in the ocean and fish for the stuff that they're going to eat. And we use antibiotics there, and sometimes there are these escapes of these breeds of fish that we don't necessarily want to get out into the wild. Okay, so yeah, I've covered a lot of our environmental and animal health and a little bit of our human health, but what about our top killers? That is our chronic disease and causing our premature death. Here's where I have another poll question, which is probably an easy one, but what's the #1 risk factor for death in the United States according to the science? Yeah, I think everybody got it. You guys got it, of course. It's a little bit crazy to think about, but yeah, diet is the #1 risk factor for death in the United States. And it's by far too. Tobacco is second, but if you look down the list, there's a whole bunch of other measures that are clearly diet related as well. Same with disability, although tobacco is at the top here. You know, people are not living these quality lives because of what they eat. Yeah, it's really kind of sad. Yeah, and it's crazy. You know, food is supposed to keep us alive, but unfortunately, our food is killing us. And obesity is an epidemic. And the biggest problems by far, the biggest culprits in this are saturated fat, cholesterol, and animal protein. So cholesterol and animal protein only ever comes from animal products. Saturated fat, there are very few sources of saturated fat in the plant world. So yeah, it's pretty clear what's causing these are chronic diseases. But yeah, these top ones that so many people, if they just knew that it's actually what they're eating, not their genetics. And we're finding genetics has very little to do with it, that is causing these diseases. So it turns out what's really cool is that the foods that are best for the environment, that have these low impact on the environment, are actually the best ones for our human health too. I mean, how much more miraculous can you get about that, right? How beautiful is that concept, that what's good for us is also good for the rest of the earth too. Okay, I said I would circle back and talk a little bit about also reducing food waste and eating locally. And it turns out that actually, according to the science that I've seen, even though so much food is lost in the production system, production and distribution, and from people's plates, eating plant-based has way more of a positive impact than if we were to eliminate all of the supply chain food losses, which is incredibly compelling. And then when it comes to eating locally, actually that makes very little difference. And so transport is an incredibly small contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions of our foods. For a lot of food products, the most it gets up to is maybe 10% of the total emissions for that. But when you're talking about meat, especially beef, it's like very, very little. So, you know, if you're eating beef and lamb, whether they're grown locally or shipped from the other side of the world, it doesn't matter very much in the total emissions. Yeah, that was a little surprising to me to learn. So yeah, you know what, why is this not out there? Who am I that I am telling you all of this stuff? I mean, you guys might be thinking, oh, she's clearly vegan. What the heck? You know, why is this not a thing? Why is this not out there? Well, yeah, there are a lot of very, very powerful forces that very much benefit from the status quo. Industry is, lots of different industries are a big part of that, not just the meat industries, but restaurant and packaged food industries are like up to $1 trillion just in the United States. And then of course you've got this, you know, these whole business of providing the supplies needed to farm these animals and slaughter them and distribute them. And then of course marketing, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second too. Unfortunately, there's so much conflict of interest out there too in our leadership. You know, we're lucky that we live in a capitalist society and a democracy, but unfortunately that is actually working against us here. Because, you know, as you know, it's really all about the money. Yeah, and you know, when we've tried to enact policy to address these things, it will erupt in major political debate. So we tried to put a sustainability clause into our U.S. dietary guidelines in 2015 and then again in 2020. And it's not, it's definitely not going over very well because, of course, we have a hard enough time just putting the dietary guidelines together to say that, you know, come right out and say that meat is not good. Plants are much better for you. Yeah. So yeah, this is why it needs to be you and why our leaders won't act. So yeah, I was just gonna switch gears and give you guys a word about protein and marketing, because of course that's the one thing that everyone's always worried about as well. Plant-based, I don't know, yeah, where am I gonna get my protein? So I actually have a poll question here for you guys. So yeah, if you measure up the protein found in beef and beans, it really, you cannot go wrong with beans. You get just as much protein, if not better protein from plants. So my question, yeah, so we know that vitamin D deficiency is called rickets. Vitamin C deficiency is called scurvy. What's a protein deficiency called? And my point in asking this question here is, you know, how many of you actually know this and have heard of it? And probably most of you have not heard of this before because it never happens. Yeah, all right, this is a good one. This is a little bit tougher for you guys. It's actually kwashiorkor. And I had never heard of that before either, but yeah, so kwashiorkor is the term for a protein deficiency, which very often goes hand in hand with a deficiency in all of the other nutrients. So basically it's a person that's starving is the only people that would really suffer a protein deficiency, unless somebody's got some underlying issue that, you know, it's very rare. But yeah, so my point there is that protein deficiency is never our problem. What is our problem is fiber. Fiber is the biggest deficiency, and fiber only comes from plants. Yeah, but you know, marketing is incredibly powerful. I just love this quote that I've seen in a couple of places now, that I don't understand how one industry has managed to convince the most intelligent species on Earth that they have the same nutritional needs as a baby cow. And I think it's hilarious too when, you know, I have actually gotten this comment before that, oh, being vegan is, oh, that's so wussy. But really, is meat very manly when you're talking about a harmless animal raised in a cage that somebody else killed and cut up for you? And in many cases, they've already even chewed it for you. Yeah. And that also marketing is what makes the vegans out to be the weird ones too. I don't know. One way that I like to present this and think about protein versus carbohydrates is that, you know, carbohydrates are like filling up your gas tank every day. You run out and then you need to resupply. Whereas amino acids or proteins, they are constantly being recycled, so you don't need nearly as much to take in. And this is more like replacing water that's been evaporated from a fountain each day. You always have that pool of amino acid source where you just need to replace here a little bit here and there. So yeah, one big problem and one small solution that it really is so simple. All of the science is saying that the single biggest thing you can do for the environment is shift to a plant-based diet, as well as encouraging others. That's also a good thing to do. And this study just came out that I'm so happy to find that scientists found that when they measured brain activity and satiety after a meal, one meal, they fed a meal with meat to one group of people and a plant-based meal to these groups of people that include people with underlying medical conditions as well as healthy people. And it turns out the plant-based diet was more satisfying. So how beautiful is it that just one big dietary shift, we could get rid of 80% of our chronic diseases. We could give wildlife back its land and its habitats, and we could significantly reduce our environmental crisis. I just love this quote by Dr. Michael Greger, who is an MD. The most ethical diet just so happens to be the most environmentally sound diet, just so happens to be the healthiest. And I assure everyone here that has not tried this before, it is not restrictive. And in fact, I would argue the exact opposite, that really how many choices do you have when you go out to eat? Everybody knows where to find a burger, but you don't necessarily know where to find all of these wonderful, beautiful foods that are more plant-based. So this is all of the stuff that we're missing out on all of the time. And of course, there are plant-based versions of all of these favorite foods anyway, but so many new things to discover. Yeah. And lastly, it's not flavorless either. Look at all of these condiments and garnishes that we use to give our food flavor. They're all plant-based. How funny is that? So yeah, I think I'm ending on this little quote, you know, yeah, it might seem like a really big deal to someone that has never tried this before. What keeps us from following a plant-based diet? Yeah, it's overcoming habits, tastes, learning new ways to cook and shop, planning during travel, because those choices are all the same out there. And then, yeah, of course, the social aspect. But when it's the fate of our species and all of the other species on Earth, yeah, it's really not that big of a deal. Anyway, that was all I had. I thank Jenna and Carrie for setting this all up and allowing me to share some of this knowledge I've gotten over the years. And I always include John Thompson in my acknowledgments here because he's actually the one that got me started doing all of this research. And of course, thank you to all of the scientists that are putting themselves out there, and these other truth seekers too, and actionists. I don't necessarily say activists because yeah, it's kind of a negative connotation to it, but yeah, we're the ones that are actionists. So anyway, yeah, thank you. With that, if anybody has any more questions, I'm happy to answer, and or if there's any discussion points. I'd love to hear from you guys too. I don't know everything, that's for sure. Some people in the audience might be more knowledgeable than me.
So Jolene, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I think we're going to open it up to, I think we're safe to open it up for some conversation here. And John Thompson is here. I'm not sure if he's on video. But.
Shout out, thank you.
And yes, I did give people the ability to unmute themselves, so make sure that is working. The chat box is open as well. And I just wanted to say thank you, Jolene. We really appreciate you doing presentations for us. You're so knowledgeable, and your ability and willingness to talk about this is amazing. And I know you've inspired a lot of people, so we appreciate you. And yeah, our sponsors were Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, so Ollie Online, as well as Healthy World Sedona, Gardens for Humanity, and Plant to Platter. And I know Chris is still here, and she's got some amazing classes coming up. And before we get into questions, if you want, Chris, you can say hello, and John as well, and Don and Bev are here too. So feel free to say anything, guys. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Jolene. That was marvelous. And I see some friendly faces out there. And I do just want to let you know, one of the things Jolene mentioned was the fact that it's hard to, maybe if you're not used to eating a plant-based diet, switching over to a plant-based diet. And so what I do through Plant to Platter is I teach classes out in the community, in person usually, but not right now during COVID typically. But I've worked with a lot of organizations, with individuals and groups. But what I'm doing now is through Coconino Community College, offering some plant-based cooking classes. So I wanted to share that in a PDF form, if that's okay, in the chat box. So I'll just share these classes with you. Let me see if I can do it quickly. So it should be loading, sending them over to you. And let me know once those are received. But my first class coming up is focused on an amazing Aztec meal. And it's a full meal, 3 recipes in an hour. And it's on November 5th, Thursday, November 5th. And there's 2 class times, one at noon to 1, and another one at 5 to 6. So you'll see that in the PDF. You can click on whatever link, and it will take you there to Coconino Community College's registration form. And then with the holidays coming up, you also don't have to forego yummy holiday treats. You can make them out of whole foods that are plant-based. And I show you how to do that on Thursday, December 3rd. And those 2 class links are in there as well. It's also a noon to 1 and a 5 to 6 p.m. class. So whatever works into your schedule, Coconino Community College has asked me to do these classes, which I think is wonderful because it's getting out there to the general population, which I'm excited about. And it's really hopefully going to meet the needs of those who might be wanting to get more plants onto their plate in a flavorful, healthy way that's good for all of us and good for the planet. If you have any questions, my contact information is in that form as well. So thanks a lot, and you should have received the PDF now.
Thank you, Chris. Oh, and John's there too. Do you want to say hi, John?
Yeah, I would like to say hi, everybody. And that was very nice of you, Jolene, to mention me, although I don't even remember. All I know is that you were very enthusiastic about these kinds of things and gave a great presentation at our Veg Fest. And I'm just delighted to see you being so active in this. So thank you very much for another good presentation. I wonder if I'm allowed to share my screen, can I show you another little quick quiz that might relate to exactly what you've been talking about? It says it's green here. Can I see if I can do it? No, it's disabled. I can tell you about it if
Well, try it now. I tried to enable.
Okay.
I check marked it. Is that what I said?
Oh yeah, good.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find the right thing here. Okay. All right, can you see this now?
Yep.
So this is an email that I got. I'm an AARP member, or I was at one point at least. I'm still on their mailing list. And they sent me this thing that says, it's a little quiz about protein. Protein is especially important part of our diet as we age. That's why we're calling on you to answer the question below about these packed with protein foods. And so your quiz today is, which has the most protein per 100 grams, chicken, lentils, or tuna? And you have to sort of answer that to yourself. I won't actually show you the answer. I'll tell you what it says because it's on another app. But I answered lentils, partly because I'm just a recalcitrant sort. And I thought that maybe they were just getting around to helping people think more about plants. And there's some trick question in there. No, it says it's actually chicken. Per 100 grams, lean chicken breast has 32 grams of protein. The tuna has 29.9, so 30, and lentils at 9 grams. So they're reinforcing, unfortunately, the idea that you get a lot more protein with these animal products than you do with your plant-based products, even though they told you on the first page that all 3 of them were packed with protein foods. So I wanted to share that with you just as another example that the meat industry somewhere is behind this, I'm sure, in trying to keep this discussion going about protein rather than fiber or other things that really make more of a difference to us. So I thought you might enjoy that.
Thanks, John. So you'll have to hit, okay, excellent.
Can I talk now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just wanted to say, John, JT shared that with Bev and I this morning, and I was so upset with this protein fixation because most Americans with their meat and dairy get far more protein than they need. And of course, it's from the wrong source. It causes all kinds of other maladies because of the cholesterol and other associated antibiotics and all that other. But I literally wrote the AARP and I said, you folks need to check the science and so forth and so on, and kind of ranted for a little bit. But so JT, I hope you do the same.
Well, that was part of the idea, was to say, should we start to write to these companies when they mess up like this? And I said the same thing to Darcy Hitchcock about the Sustainability Alliance. I think we need to get behind some of this stuff and actually talk back when they say things that are misleading or incorrect.
Right.
Of course, the other thing to consider also is, what is a serving size? You know, if you have a serving of lentils, is it 300 grams? I don't know. Whereas, you know, you're getting more protein from a serving of lentils than you are from a serving of chicken. Just because they're saying per 100 grams, it doesn't mean that's what you're going to eat.
Yes.
It's a really good point.
Good point.
Yeah. You know, we wanted
And
yeah.
that's perfect. I just looked that up and you need 1.5 cups of lentils versus a 3-ounce chicken breast. You actually get more with 1.5 cups of lentils. So it's tricky that way. Great point. Thank you.
Tricky.
Yeah, good thinking. We wanted to mention too, one other project that we have going at Healthy World Sedona to support people who transition or would like to transition to a plant-based lifestyle. It's called the Healthy World Vitality Plan. And it's going to launch in January. And it's really based on a small group model of people who would like to adopt a healthier lifestyle. It's focused around human health, but guess what? The environment and animals all benefit as well. And anybody who wants to join a group or start a group, if they have family and friends, it's not limited in location because it'll be online, at least to begin with. We'll provide a coach and a lot of great information and a kind of a built-in support network, because I think, you know, one of the one of our observations is it's easy to give people information, and I think we all see this information about what's healthier, what's better for the planet. But the difficulty is if it's a change in how we live, it's difficult to do. We tend to drift back, and one of the greatest tools we have to prevent that is kind of accountability and support from a group of people. So the whole point of this project or this plan is to develop that accountability and support among a group of people. And I just put in the chat box, or am putting in the chat box, the website for this plan. So if you're interested, or you know somebody who's interested, you can fill out a little form right there, and we'll have your name and get you signed up for a group when we start. So.
Yeah, and Doctors Dean and Aisha Shirzai, who spoke here in 2019, neurologists out of Loma Linda, are actually training 6 of the original cadre of 6 coaches, which includes Bev and myself, and also Chris, who's on this call. And they have a really good program that goes through all 5 aspects of health, one of which, of course, is nutrition, but there's also exercise and various other meditation and other techniques. But it's a great program, and as Bev said, it will encourage accountability and friendship, and the fact that people who join these groups, and they can even be from an employer. So if you know any employee organizations that may be interested, they hold each other accountable, but they also provide support. And the coaches will always be there as a resource, initially fairly intensively, but then we'll be backing away on purpose over time so they can run their own program with our occasional intervention. But then we'll have time, hopefully, to start additional groups.
Thank you. I was muted, and I'll definitely send a follow-up email and include that link in there as well as Chris's classes. And I just want to say we have a smaller group. This is being recorded, so that will go out as well. And quite a few people got stuck in an imaginary waiting room today. My email has been blowing up. So sorry, Jolene, we missed some people, but they'll definitely get the recording. And yeah, any other questions or comments? I'm sure Jolene will be happy to answer them. Yeah.
I have a question. Okay. In talking with people that call themselves environmentalists, often they completely ignore animal agriculture. And even if some of us start telling them what the scientific evidence is, they will use several tactics to still ignore it. Number one is the conflicting statistics, which, you know, you've already addressed that, like that they don't all include every level. But another one is Paul Hawkins, I believe, well-intentioned book Drawdown, that puts 3 things ahead of diet. And so do you have a response for that, or a way to reconcile it?
Well, I know I'm not the only one here that is thinking about these things. I wonder if there's anybody else that would want to tackle that one first. Just a thought.
Well, wasn't it Hawkins, JT, that was really big on chlorofluorocarbons and so forth and drawdown? But I noticed in one of the charts that you had, Jolene, those were only a small percentage relative to the other.
Well, and a lot of the refrigeration is in fact being used because of animal agriculture. So interestingly enough,
Right.
Even though it's put in there as a separate thing, because I think it was number 1, it actually is in service of animal agriculture to a great degree. Food waste was another huge one, and
30%.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the food that's wasted is animal products because they don't keep in the same way. So I think you know, one thing is to dig in a little deeper and just say, well, okay, these are all important. I mean, it's not, Paul Hawkins' list is not an either or list. It's an and list. And the fact that something's higher doesn't make this not important. And in fact, these things are related to each other.
I think I can address that a little bit too. Paul Hawkins' list is not a list of things an individual can do without any help from anybody else. It's a list of the most impactful things that humanity can do. So when you talk about refrigeration, there's only so much each of us as an individual can do other than writing to refrigerating companies to say, you know, get energy certified or something. There's little we can do to affect that directly. Because plant-based diet is number 4, it's the one thing that we can do that's the highest on the list that we can do completely on our own without any help from anybody else. Food waste is actually above that, and you would think, well, we could stop wasting food, but it's actually easier to not eat meat and dairy than it is to avoid all kinds of food waste. You know, for some of the reasons that Bev just mentioned. It happens, you know, early up in the process. Sometimes the things we buy in the store, there's already been parts of it that have been thrown away, the tops to carrots or something like that, that you can't compost yourself. So I think that's why it's number 4. But you can confidently tell anyone that switching to a plant-based diet is the most effective thing that you as an individual can do completely on your own to avoid climate change.
That's a great question, Cheryl. And of course, I immediately froze up because I always have such a hard time articulating, you know, in an argument or defending. And so not to plug our upcoming NASCA workshop, but we do have, so we're really going to start working on bringing the community together that we have. And the first one's going to be storytelling, which is focusing on your story of self, but also climate conversations is huge. So when we're out in the community and we're asking for climate action, and you get people that, even if they have a simple question that you can easily address, I think that it can be very controversial, and so it can be very off-putting and you lose your words. And so we're gonna just kind of practice with each other how to have these conversations so we can more easily articulate and speak the truth about how animal agriculture and deforestation is really such a huge cause of the global warming. And yeah, and that's human caused, so.
It is a great question. I was going to give the same answer as Carrie as well. And, you know, it's just that talking part of it and the defensiveness. And I've been even talking with a professor at NAU, you know, and he says climate change, it's a hyper object, it's so big. And really the most important thing we can do is kind of get better at our communication skills. And that question gets asked all the time and it's hard to answer. So great answers from everyone. And yeah, we're just in it together and we'll keep trying, I think.
Yeah, kudos to you, Jolene. One of the visuals that you presented today, mental visions, if you will, was the water impacts. You know, we were just in a conversation a few days ago with a bunch of other organizations that are trying. One of the 3 topics of the conversation was about environmental, you know, improvement and so forth, and some of the folks there were from like the water, you know, Friends of the Verde River and Water Alliance and all of that. And the image that you presented today about opening a water faucet full blast and just letting it run 24 hours a day forever is, you would still use less water than as a plant-based person than someone who's meat and dairy, the standard American diet. I mean, that's powerful. I love that.
I loved it too. I can't take credit for it. I actually heard it on a podcast recently, but I did actually double check the calculations. I'm like, actually, yeah, if all of these figures are right, it's true. I mean, of course, it's going to depend on what kind of, you can't like let a fire hose run full blast all the time. But, there's those variables. But yeah, it's interesting.
And before we close, I just want to give a special thanks to Jolene for doing this presentation. Since the pandemic happened, she's been so busy in service to our health community. And then here's Nazca, tap, tap, tap. Can you do this little presentation? So of course she says yes and came through. And I'm excited that this is recorded. And so we're also going to report it to everybody that registered, so you can share it with all of your friends and groups, like-minded groups. And then we're going to continue to keep expanding on this and join our climate conversations and our workshops that we have for people that are in the NASCA community, whether you're a volunteer or even if you're just in our community participating in our presentations. Please join us, because this is all important for us to be always talking about climate action and what we can do. And so we encourage you to keep on joining our virtual presentation. So thank you, Jolene. And we'll see you all online. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.